In an earlier video, I referred to this map showing the geographical distribution of religions. I suggested that the displacement of the different religions was more down to history than the veracity of the claims made by its adherents. I also suggested that it provides evidence for God being a man-made construct, rather than the other way round. But the map is also significant for another reason. It shows the prevalence of religions throughout the world. Indeed, throughout all of recorded history, every civilization, without exception, has created a god or gods. God-making appears to be part of the human psyche. This is a fact that every theist today, of whatever flavor or persuasion, must accept. For they do not believe in the gods of ancient Greece, but they cannot deny that others did. They do not believe in the Norse gods, but they have to accept that others did. They do not believe in the hundreds of gods and goddesses that have been worshipped throughout the ages. The theists will say that these gods do not exist and did not exist, and thereby they have to accept that they must have been man-made. So what is it about man that causes this propensity to create deities? And why is it that those believers today do not realize that the God that they worship is just another man-made concept? In addressing this question, I had intended to refer to this book, Why We Believe in God or Gods, written by Thomson. But then I thought I'd go one better and get him to explain it himself. Here is the first part of an interview I had with him.
Thank you very much, Thomson, for taking the time to talk to me. I am pleased to say that I have read your book, Why We Believe in God or Gods. And for those that haven't, perhaps you'd like to explain what the book is all about.
Certainly. First of all, thank you for reading the book, and thank you for having me on the show. The idea for the book was very simple. We are now really on the verge of a comprehensive cognitive neuroscience of religious belief. We really are getting close to understanding how human minds generate religious beliefs, why they generate the specific ones they do, what makes us all vulnerable to generate them and believe them. And I think it's an incredibly exciting new science. It was something that was not available 15 years ago. It is now available. I wanted to write something that could give a general reader, no specialty knowledge, a general reader a quick introduction to this exciting science, and to present it in a way where they could read it in an hour and a half, 2 hours at the most, and that evening turn around to somebody and say, hey, let me explain to you how human minds generate religious beliefs. Let me show you the mechanisms.
I think you describe it, if not in your book, in one of the lectures I've seen, as a sort of like Swiss Army knife to use in conversations. And one of the finest tools in that knife, I think, comes in the earliest chapter, where you explain about the evolution of the mind. And I think a lot of people are ready to accept or ready to understand, more able to understand the evolution of the body and how it adapted to the environment, but for some reason they don't seem to apply that to the mind, and they don't seem to appreciate that the mind went through the same evolutionary processes. Would you like to tell us a bit about that? What processes were affecting the evolution of the mind?
Well, the mind is what the brain does, and the brain evolved under the same rules of natural selection that all other living tissue did. And if you step back and think about it for a moment, every single organism, every plant, every animal is this integrated collection of problem-solving devices that evolved over evolutionary time to promote, in some specific way, the genes that design those adaptations. So let's just look at our bodies, for instance. My heart solves the problem of pumping blood. Hemoglobin solves the problem of transporting the oxygen. My lungs solve the problem of extracting the oxygen from the air. So my body is this integrated collection of problem-solving devices, adaptations. at every single level of biological inquiry. It is Darwinian natural selection. That also includes the mind. The mind is what the brain does. The brain is this integrated collection of problem-solving devices. And let's be concrete about it. The viewer is looking at me now, you're looking at me, and you have this image of me and you hear my voice. Well, that comes from very complicated visual adaptations. My image is an upside-down, two-dimensional image on your retina, very specific adaptations converted into that view that you have. It's all, a seamless whole as you're looking at it. But it was built by all these adaptations. And religion is comprised of primarily social cognitive adaptations that were designed over evolutionary time to solve particular problems. And we know that religion, it utilizes the attachment system. That's an adaptation. It utilizes theory of mind mechanisms, our ability to reason about what's going on in somebody else's mind, agency detection, something called decoupled cognition, that if you look at religious beliefs are the product, sort of the byproduct, of mechanisms that were originally designed to solve other problems and are basically part of our everyday, ordinary cognition, which we take for granted, but is actually pretty extraordinary.
Building on what you're saying and observations that not just myself has made, but obviously many people have made, it seems that every single society, every single civilization, every single count throughout history, civilizations have created a god or collection of gods or some sort of theology. And so there does seem to be a common need almost for mankind to do that. In effect, this is what your book is explaining, why that is. And you refer to these adaptations. Can we look at a couple in general so people have an understanding of exactly what you're referring to?
Certainly. I think the reason every civilization has had religion is every civilization, every group is made up of human beings. And religions arise from fundamental human nature. Again, these mechanisms of the human mind. And there's about 20 or so adaptations that have been identified as crucial for religion. I think a useful group to remember falls under the term damn it. If you just remember D-A-A-M and then M-I-T, damn it. And it stands for decoupled cognition, the attachment system, agency detection, moral intuitions, minimally counterintuitive ideas, intentionality, and theory of mind. Those are what I like to think about as the sort of big seven. And those are particularly prominent in generating religious ideas. Decoupled cognition refers to two things. We can decouple our cognition in time and place. So right now, whoever's watching this, if you right now think about a conversation that you might want to have with President Obama, you can imagine a complicated social interaction with President Obama and asking him for something and having him give something in return, reciprocity. And that's decoupled cognition. I can have a complicated interaction with an unseen other. I can think about what's going on in their mind and interact with them. And it's absolutely, we take it for granted, but all of us, probably in the course of time that you're listening to me give this explanation, you might have a momentary thought about a conversation you have to have with somebody later on tonight. That's decoupled cognition, complicated social interaction with an unseen other. And so you can see how that can be used by religion. You can have this complicated interaction with a god or an ancestor. And you gave, I thought, just a great example the other night when we were talking. All of us right now can have a complicated conversation with Christopher Hitchens. We can imagine him, we can imagine talking to him about some idea, we can imagine what he might say. And again, that's decoupled cognition. It also includes memory. We can remember conversations that we had in the past. I remember that conversation that I had with you the other night. Again, I can decouple in time from the present moment, go to the future or the past, and can decouple in terms of place. President Obama's in Washington. So that's one aspect of decoupled cognition. The other aspect is that we also decouple where we perceive bodies and mind. So the part of my brain that is processing the vision of your body, your physical appearance right now, that's in the lateral part of my cortex. When I think about my own body, perceiving my hand, that's also perceived in the lateral part of my cortex. But when I think about what goes on in your mind, what question you might be planning on asking me, when I think about what's going on in your mind, I'm processing that information with the medial part of my cortex, the medial frontal lobes, the midline. So the separation of mind and body is part of the very architecture of our brains. And this idea of mind separate from body is part of the default setting of our minds, part of the basic architecture of our mind, this ability to conceive of minds independent of bodies. Well, you can see that that's just one short step from souls, the concept of souls and people living on. And those perceptions about other people's minds never turn off. I mean, we'll always be able to call up Christopher Hitchens in our mind and interact with him as if he were alive. It's just a little bit of knowledge that tells us, okay, he's dead. But that's another aspect of decoupled cognition. The ability to separate mind and body leads to the idea of souls. So it's decoupled cognition.